Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary. Hey guys, we're here today with Michelle Dickinson. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me on.
So excited. You want to tell me a bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name is Michelle. As you said, I live in New Jersey. I am a very passionate mental health change maker. I have a company called Trifecta Mental Health. After experiencing my own depression and growing up with my mother, who is bipolar, I got really connected to wanting to make a difference. And so last year, I left the pharmaceutical industry after 19 long years, and I took the plunge to become an entrepreneur and pursue my dream. So that's really what I'm up to. I'm up to helping cultures in the workplace become more compassionate, understanding environments for those with invisible disabilities. And then my business partner and I are working to cause change for first responders. That's something that we're really passionate about. And she's a police sergeant who has delivered to 2,000 officers mental health certification. So we're both very passionate about that space. So both spaces I'm playing in, and I'm looking forward to making a huge difference.
Wow, it is a big jump and completely life-changing. How
Totally.
has it changed your life and what you've been doing?
You mean leaving my corporate job?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's something very comfortable about being in the corporate space and having that paycheck to count on all the time. For me, this whole experience has been exhilarating because I'm actually doing what brings me the most fulfillment. And I can't say that I had deep fulfillment working in my corporate job. It was gratifying in a lot of ways. I love the people. I love the stability of it. And while there's so much uncertainty in what I'm doing, I'm very committed to it and I really want to make a difference. So I find it very fulfilling, and I'm looking forward to seeing like where that goes. And just being in the space of possibility is where I am right now.
Yeah, that's the most feeling fulfilled, and then you could actually really go and do what you want to do. Yeah.
For sure. As long as you make sure that you're eating, that you have food on the table. That's a very important factor, which I try
Right.
to do. So,
Priorities first, survival mode, and then we go.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you want to tell us like a bit about mental health and how it affects the person themselves and the people around them?
Yeah. So my experience is not, I have lived experience. I'm not a clinician. I grew up with my mom who was bipolar. So I observed what that was like for her. And then a few years ago, I dealt with depression for the first time. So I know what that feels like. It's really hard. I think mental health is, we live upon, this spectrum of mental well-being, just like we do with physical well-being, right? We have moments where we're in physical peak shape, and we have moments where we're in mental peak shape. And then we dip down and we're not in the best of shape. So we're kind of always moving along that spectrum. And I think, it could be really hard. I think about my mother and the fact that she was diagnosed with bipolar, and the impact it had on my family. And it was really hard. She definitely had the roller coaster of mania to depression, and it could be extremely punishing for those around to just try to make sure that she's okay, has what she needs, and then that we manage the impact that she has on us. So it could be really hard, but once you understand it and you spend time having more knowledge around it, you can find a little bit more compassion, and then just be able to be more supportive.
Yeah, so the first is like to be knowledgeable, like you said, and aware of what's going on, not like she's just acting crazy for no reason, but
Right.
there's a reason why this is happening.
Right.
Yeah. So what would you suggest to someone who's in a relationship with someone that has a mental illness?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I support caregivers mostly because of my lived experience, and I have my clients who talk to me about this all the time, and they just go, I just want to help them, I want to support them. But the first and foremost thing I tell caregivers is you have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. It's the oxygen mask example. You have to put the mask on yourself before you can help another person. So if you're constantly depleting your energy and trying to support them, you know that you're not going to show up the best way that you want to. And so it's really important. I think there's twofold: taking care of yourself so that you're feeling okay and strong enough to take care of them, But another thing that I learned after my mother had passed away, I stepped in my mother's shoes and I actually learned a lot about her illness. I watched a couple of documentaries to just kind of understand the illness so that I could stop feeling like the victim or being at the effects of her behavior, and start to step into her shoes and try to understand it and understand what life might have been like for her. And that's where I could have some empathy and compassion. So I say, take care of yourself and then educate yourself on the illness that your loved one has so that you know what life might be like for them, and you can have that empathy and try to support them in a way that might help them.
First, you take care of yourself, then you educate yourself, and then what's your next step to actually be able to go and help the other person?
Well, I think it depends. It depends on the situation, right? If the person is not open to getting support, they need to be surrounded by some type of a support circle. And there's only so much we can do as caregivers because we don't understand truly, like we don't walk in their shoes. So I would make sure that the loved one has connections with other people who have been diagnosed with their diagnosis. There's great communities out there where people can connect with. There's one that I used to moderate for called 18%. And that's just peer to peer. That's where people who have similar diagnoses can go and just talk to one another about what they're experiencing and how maybe they've navigated something or their emotions that day, because it's real when you can connect with someone else who's experiencing exactly what you are.
Yeah, and there's no knowledge about it, but they're actually experiencing it. So what's the hardest part for someone who's in a relationship with someone that has mental illness?
Yeah, I think that's going to be very unique to the relationship. I think a lot of times people think that they can navigate it on their own and they go up in their head and they try not to burden their loved one with it, but really they're navigating it in their head, and it's far scarier to try to figure it out on your own, and more valuable if they actually express the words of how they're feeling. So I think it's knowing the level of support to provide. It's checking in with your loved one, listening to them, but then not being assaulted by so much information that it depletes you. So I think it's finding that balance. And, if you love someone, you want to make sure that there's open communication and they're getting what they need. So I think it's just kind of knowing the level of support that you need to provide your loved one, and be there in that level that they need, but also manage your own energy and your own well-being in the process.
Yeah, so it starts with understanding and taking care of yourself so that you could understand and take care of your partner, and working through the challenges
Together and take it even further, because it is a challenge that you're working through
together. And there can be a real deepening of connection there, right? Because you're navigating it together, you're a team. I mean, I've seen so many remarkable couples. There's a woman I went to high school with who is married to a gentleman who's bipolar, and they have had such ups and downs, but yet they are so close. They actually run a company together, and they're so close together. And in a lot of ways, I think his illness has brought them closer. So I think, those are the examples we need to remember, that it's perfectly possible to actually thrive and get closer to your loved one if there is, that open dialogue and connection and trust.
Yeah, 100%. Now, is there something to be extra aware of or more cautious about when you're in a relationship with someone who's got a mental illness?
Yeah, I think we always have to keep in mind the vices that folks will gravitate towards who have a mental illness. If they're not identifying healthy vices, it's very easy to navigate to alcoholism, drugs, like whatever, is not going to serve them, as opposed to making sure that they get into therapy and that they're taking their medication. If they're prescribed medication, that they're doing what they can for their well-being. Are they getting a walk in and getting fresh air? What are some healthy vices that they're doing? And you're just like checking and making sure that they're tapping into those, because the tendency is, and you could do the research, the tendency is when people are hurting, they want to lean towards something that's going to give them relief. And so it can either be a very healthy vice or it can be a very unhealthy vice. So it's making sure that they're not having a couple too many drinks or, wanting to do things that aren't really going to serve them.
Yeah, and that's not just for people with mental illness. All of us want relief right now, pleasure immediately. Knowing that we could go and do something that maybe won't solve the problem, but could help a bit, Like going for a walk or talking to someone who supports us is fantastic.
Very helpful. Very, very helpful. Yep.
Yeah, then comes the balance between wanting to support your spouse and trying to control them or move them in a way that you think is best for them. Because by the end of the day, they're their own person. And if you know, let's say they're drinking too much, you want them to stop them from that. But you don't want to come across in a negative way. You don't want them to feel like you're in charge of them.
It does, but I also think it goes back to always checking in with one another. One of the things I promote whenever I give my resilience webinar to companies is I have everyone pause and just check in with themselves on how they're feeling that particular day. Because, if you're feeling despair or you're not having the level of joy that you know is possible in your life, you're vulnerable to gravitating to those things. So I think it's always, as a partner, you want to check in with each other and say, hey, how are you feeling? Is today a good day? Is today a bad day? And then if it's a bad day, then you can actually support them and like, hey, let's go for a run. Let's go for a walk. Let's just get out of here, go do something. Versus if you're not tuned into them and they're running to do something that's going to soothe them, all you're seeing is that behavior. You're not really understanding the why.
Yeah, I really like that. And also when you do come, you're coming from a very like understanding, loving point, not just, hey, you're doing something bad, go and do this instead.
Right.
It's like you really care about them. Yeah. I like that you do resilience webinars. I didn't know about that.
I do. Yeah. Thanks for asking. So I have a couple of corporate clients who were very eager to support their people who are all working remotely now. So I've been building a mental health strategy for them in their workplace. And they said, hey, Michelle, what can we do right now to support our people? We want them to know that they're supported, they're cared about. Just remind them of some basic things they can be doing right now, being quarantined. It's like foreign, right? So I put together some of my best tools and tips for them. So now I'm doing a resilience webinar where people can, join a Zoom call, engage, get reminded of what you can be doing every day to just stay mentally fit. Right now, I think we're in week 6. I think it's like we have quarantine fatigue. So I think now more than ever, people need to be reminded, I need to get 8 hours of sleep. I need to get a walk in. I need to make time to relax. It's okay to binge watch some Netflix, but not camp out there for life. These are just some basic things that people can be reminded of. And I think it's those reminders that help us get a little bit of oomph back into our lives.
Actually did also a workshop on resilience yesterday. The first thing we started with was writing down all the times that you were resilient in the past, because sometimes people get so down, like, hey, life's so hard now and things are tough. But if you remember times that you were resilient, you realize like, hey, I actually have that in me.
You do. Yeah, that's a great way to start off because, it's very hard to see that. We spend a lot of time talking about gratitude. If you get up in the morning and you think about 3 things you're grateful for, you're not going to sit there and think about all the things that have been removed from your daily life because of the quarantine. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, like I have food on the table. I'm surrounded by loved ones. I got a roof over my head and I'm healthy. I don't have this thing called COVID, right? So if you get present to all the things you're grateful for, it's the same thing as what you're suggesting with resilience all the times that, all the good stuff, right? Like we have to just remind each other, what's the good stuff?
Yeah, it's literally what you focus on. Yeah.
I just think now is the time more than ever. First of all, I'm so excited about where this mental health conversation is going because I think this whole experience with COVID is getting us all very present to our mental health. And I love that because with conversation can come change and we can get rid of stigma. More people will get care. And I think now is a perfect time to make sure that we're checking in on ourselves and each other. Just, are you doing okay? How are you doing? And when you do reach out and you do check in on someone, it's actually helping you. So I just want to remind people, someone goes silent on social media. You haven't connected with someone in a few days. Pick up the phone and say hello. You'll be surprised how much it'll actually help you and it'll help the loved one. So
yeah, that is so true. I don't think people realize the extent of how much it affects them when they help someone else. So thanks for that. It was awesome having you on.
Thanks for having me.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode and subscribe to the podcast. Leave a comment below so I can know what you think. And to book your relationship photo shoot, CJE session, or just to hear more about what we do, go to lifepicksrelationships.as.me. I'm waiting.